Vice President Mike Pence is traveling to Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands today. Pence's trip comes after the Trump administration was criticized for its slow response to the unfolding humanitarian crisis there. Pence visited Orlando, Florida yesterday, where he met with Puerto Ricans fleeing the island after Hurricane Maria. After the meeting with members of Central Florida's Puerto Rican community, he tweeted this, quote, The needs of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands will be great, but the generosity of the American people will be greater still. And we are with you, and will be with you every step of the way. Meanwhile, officials say 93% of the island still lacking electricity. Only half the island has running water available. Joining us now to talk more about Puerto Rico's path for financial recovery after this devastation of Hurricane Maria is Peter Mougey, securities and investment fraud attorney with the Pensacola, Florida law firm Levin Papantonio. Thank you for joining us today. So, Peter,
thanks for having me.
Many Puerto Rican citizens are still without, Puerto Ricans who are American citizens, by the way, still without clean water, without any electricity. The stakes are very different now than after the devastation of the previous hurricanes. What should be this priority moving forward when it comes to financial recovery and federal aid to Puerto Rico?
I think there's got to be multiple tracks. I mean, you need basic services on a day-to-day basis. We have to deploy defense resources. We have to get into the island at a greater pace. This isn't just dropping off water. This isn't dropping off food. This is infrastructure. You mentioned power. It's not your typical power problem where you have power lines down, you have power poles down. I represent several hundred investors from the island and have for several years, and I'm intimately familiar with their power agency because it's so decrepit, and some of the bonds that they sold have blown up way before the hurricane. So the problem is that the infrastructure for power is gone, and they almost need to start over. So one of the first things we need to do is get power on the island. So you have running water, basic human services, so our Puerto Rican brethren down there can have just run-of-the-mill, day-to-day water, health, safety, welfare, and get the island back up to recovery. That's one track, and the other track obviously has got to be financial. They were in financial devastation due to the $72 billion of bonds that were in default prior to the hurricane. So there's got to be multiple lines and multiple tracks. Care for people on a day-to-day basis, get the power grid back up, and address the financial devastations that's been coming for years.
And now I'm glad you brought up those bonds, because President Trump has obviously brought up Puerto Rico's financial situation. The $72 billion in debt already in bankruptcy proceedings. That there's no question that Puerto Rico's ability to pay this debt has greatly diminished prior to the hurricane. Do you see any economic plan for Puerto Rico that would lead to cancellation of any part of that or all of its debt?
No, I really don't. And it's really kind of not that simple. I kind of chuckled when I saw President Trump and others say, well, let's just cancel the debt. That kind of demonstrates a lack of understanding of who owns the debt. Everybody's like, well, Wall Street, we need to see mercy from Wall Street. Well, unfortunately, or the vultures, unfortunately, it's not necessarily Wall Street that owns the debt. Believe it or not, most of the island owns large percentages of their net worth, their liquid net worth in Puerto Rican debt. So if you cancel Puerto Rican debt, then the people on the island are going to see their wealth just wiped away, and that's quite frankly what's happened. So it's not as simple as let's cancel the debt, let's start over, because a material number of Puerto Ricans own the debt that we're talking about canceling. It just doesn't work like that. We've got to come up with a plan. And right now there's a stay, which does give time for some analysis, but a stay to let the island get back on its feet to continue to pay the debt. They have to pay the debt because the people that own most of it, if all of a sudden it goes to 0 or 10 cents on the dollar, the income coming into those people on an island that's already 40% below the poverty line. 40% of the people live below the poverty line, and then we're going to take away their income stream from the bonds that they own. So it's not quite that simple.
Thank you so much for sharing your insight and expertise with us. That was Peter Mougey, securities and investment fraud attorney with the firm Levin Papantonio down in Florida.